My parents funded my siblings and ignored me. I built my own success, discovered their betrayal, and chose a new family over being the forgotten child. I'm 27 years old. I suppose you could say that I've been the one ignored my entire life. My younger brother Chris, 25 million, and older sister Sarah, 29 feet, are my siblings. It would be an understatement to suggest that they were always the golden children. In my parents' view, they could never do anything wrong, but I was just there. Sarah excelled academically as a child, consistently receiving straight A's and participating in all school-related activities before attending a prestigious Ivy League university. It was my parents' obsession. They couldn't stop raving about how delighted they were the moment she received her admission letter, I promise. They invited all of her relatives and friends to this lavish celebration party. We felt as though we were celebrating Sarah's academic achievement with a second Christmas. Chris, however, didn't have to make a concerted effort. For him, everything just appeared to go smoothly. Following Sarah's example, he enrolled in a prestigious graduate program. My parents also ensured that everything was prepared for him. They purchased him a new laptop, helped him move, paid his tuition, and more. Then there was me. I attended a state college instead of an Ivy League school. Although it was a fine school, I had the impression that my parents wouldn't boast about it the way they did about Chris and Sarah. They kind of nodded and muttered something like, "That's great, Michael," when I informed them I had been accepted, but I could tell they weren't really into it. No party, no celebration. If we ordered takeaway that night, I was lucky. I made an effort to ignore it, but as I grew older, I became more aware of how different things were for me than for them. The money was just as important as the attention. Consider the wedding of Sarah. $200,000 is no laughing matter. The setting, the catering, the dress, my parents went all out. They handled it like it was the biggest thing ever. Some members of our family were even flown in from out of state. They covered all of Chris's graduate school expenses and provided him with rent assistance until he was able to support himself. They also took care of his educational loans, so he didn't even need to worry about those. But me? I asked my parents for assistance when I was just starting out in my job and required some work-related tools, things that were necessary to even get started. I received $7,000. Please understand that $7,000 is a substantial sum of money. However, it kind of hurts when you contrast that with $200,000 for a wedding or fully covering someone's tuition. I felt like I was only receiving the bare minimum so they could claim to have been helpful. And it wasn't just the cash. I always felt like the odd one out whenever our family gathered together. Every discourse at family dinners revolved around Chris's most recent accomplishment or Sarah's fancy job. As they sat there, they would discuss their upcoming extravagant plans, vacations, or improvements to their homes. I would be sitting there consuming my meal while attempting to come up with anything to add to the discussion. What was I going to say though, really? It seemed like my accomplishments paled in comparison to what they were doing. Hey, I just finished a big project at work, and I'm still paying off my car. One dinner in particular, perhaps a year ago, comes to mind. As was customary, the topic of conversation shifted to Sarah's most recent travel plans as we were all seated around the table. "Oh, we're going to Europe for a few weeks," she revealed nonchalantly as she sipped her drink. "It's just so nice that Mom and Dad are able to help out with the expenses." Chris added his voice as well, discussing some of the wedding expenses that were paid for. In a casual tone, he remarked, "I honestly don't know what we would have done without that $200,000. Emily immediately burst out laughing, saying, "Thanks to our parents covering everything," expressing her relief that the tuition hikes had no effect on her. They seemed to be hammering their words into my head as I sat there attempting to concentrate on my plate. It wasn't just the money. I had to work for my advancement and take out loans to make ends meet, whereas they had their futures handed to them. They pretended not to have to worry about it, but every dollar seemed like a fight. The worst thing? I wasn't even included in the discourse, yet nobody appeared to notice. My face became hot, my hands clenched beneath the table, and I could feel my irritation mounting until I was unable to contain it any longer. I whispered something to me. "Must be nice." There was silence in the room, everyone was watching me. It was Sarah who spoke first. With a confused and annoyed expression on her face, as if she couldn't even begin to comprehend why I was unhappy, she questioned, "What's that supposed to mean, Michael?" I inhaled deeply while attempting to remain composed, but everything spilled out quickly. It means that not all of us get everything handed to us on a silver platter. Some of us actually have to work for what we need. They clearly didn't understand. As if it were no great issue, Chris simply shrugged and relaxed back in his chair. He smiled smugly and added, "Michael, you're always acting like you're the victim." Didn't mom and dad help you get those tools for work? That struck a chord. Even though they gave me $7,000, it seems insignificant in comparison to what they have done for Chris and Sarah. I said, yeah, they helped, firmly. But 7,000 compared to hundreds of thousands? It's not the same, and you know it. As usual, Mom tried to defuse the situation. Michael, we thought that's what you needed. We've always tried to give you what was fair. Fair? I asked, my voice bursting with resentment. You think this is fair? You've given them everything. You've practically paved their roads for them, and I've had to build mine brick by brick. From there, the discussion took a turn for the worst. Everyone made an effort to justify themselves and claim that I was exaggerating. Dad shook his head and remarked, "You're exaggerating this?" "No," I replied. "You gave me the minimum. That's the part that hurts the most. You didn't care about what I wanted, only what you thought was enough to keep me quiet. It was more than I could handle." Without saying another word, I got up and walked out of the room, my chair making a loud scraping sound against the floor. I didn't turn around, but their voices followed me as I left the room. I was tired of constantly getting the leftovers and being the one who was forgotten. That night, I was furious and stormed out of the house. I don't believe I've ever been that angry. My heart was thumping in my chest, like if it were trying to escape. It seemed like the world was closing in on me with each step I took down the driveway. I had no idea where I was heading. I simply knew that I had to leave, far away. It was late, maybe around 10 o'clock, and there was silence on the streets. You know that spooky silence where everything seems a little too motionless? Yes, that was it. As I went, the only sound was the sound of my sneakers hitting the pavement. I wasn't in the mood for distractions, so I didn't have my phone out or my headphones on. I had to think. I kept thinking about the supper while I was walking, Chris's arrogant expression, Sarah's patronizing inquiries. They all seemed to be living in a bubble of privilege and were unaware of how oppressive it was for me. I was merely an outsider with a window into their lovely little world. My frustration grew as I gave it more attention. Why didn't I say more was a question I kept asking myself. Why didn't I actually give it to them? However, I later came to the realization that my words would have had no impact. Talking to a brick wall was like that. I had my version of what happened, and they had theirs, and the two were never going to coincide. I eventually made my way to the park where I used to spend my childhood. The residence was only a 15-minute walk away. Some trees kind of obscured an old bench in a spot next to the playground. It was one of those locations you travel to when you simply need to escape from everything, and I needed that. I took a seat and simply gazed up at the sky while leaning back against the chilly wood. On this particular clear night, all the stars were visible. It would normally be soothing to me, but that night it didn't help. I couldn't stop thinking about how unfair everything was, how I had spent my entire life striving to fit in, only to be given scraps while my siblings had it all. I briefly considered not glancing at my phone as it buzzed in my pocket. However, my curiosity overcame me, and I took it out. It was Emily's text, of course. "Michael, where did you go? You need to come back. Let's talk about this." "Speak?" "Yes, exactly. I have previously heard that. Nothing in my family was ever resolved by talking. The routine was always the same. Mom and Dad would explain why things were the way they were, and I would be told to accept it. However, I wasn't in the mood for any more justifications this time. I stuffed my phone back in my pocket without answering the text. I began to mentally review everything as I sat there, including the years I had been ignored and the times I had felt like an afterthought. Even if I wasn't a flawless child, I still didn't deserve to be treated any less than the other kids. It wasn't truly about the money. It was about being appreciated and seen. And for whatever reason, my parents had come to the conclusion that Sarah or Chris's wants and aspirations were more important than mine. I'm not sure how long I sat there, but eventually the cold began to set in. The nights were growing colder, and fall was rapidly approaching. The wind sliced through the thin material of my jacket as I drew it firmly about myself. I considered going home, but the notion of going back inside that house and confronting them after everything that had transpired was too much to take. I became aware of something while I sat there. I was sick of battling for meager attention and support. I wasn't just angry anymore. I decided then and there that I was done. I'm done trying to fit into their ideal little family photo and to get them to notice me. With a renewed sense of resolve, I rose from the bench. It was time to put myself first and create the life I desired without continuously looking for their approval. I didn't require their sympathy or handouts. I was determined to make it myself and demonstrate to them what they had been missing for years. I experienced an odd mixture of relief and melancholy as I made my way back to my flat. I was relieved that I was at last taking charge of my own life, But I was also sad about the familial relationship I was giving up. I felt like I was headed in the right direction for the first time in a long time, even though I knew it wouldn't be simple. I took a seat at my desk and began making plans as soon as I arrived home. I was determined to put my all into my profession and create something for myself. Maybe they'll realize what they've been missing out on for years when I've succeeded and reached my goals on my own terms. But I had a job to do for the time being. It was time to begin crafting my own narrative, one in which I was more than a supporting character in the accomplishments of others. I was prepared for the moment that would be my chance to shine. First update. Since my last post, which was around 2 years ago, a lot has transpired. I made a choice that would change the trajectory of my life following that terrible family supper. I had had enough of being the afterthought and the forgotten son. It was time to go out on my own, free from my family's support or meddling. I approached my task with a level of resolve I had never experienced before. I began by working longer hours and taking on more tasks and responsibilities at work. After my employer took note, I received a promotion offer a few months later. Though not very significant, it was a positive start. This company idea had always been in the back of my thoughts. I now concluded that the moment had come to turn it into a reality. I planned, saved, and researched whenever I had free time. I reduced all of my expenses, including eating out, buying new clothes, and taking trips. I invested every extra dollar in my company fund. I finally got enough money to launch my firm after a year or so of saving and planning. It was a digital startup that specialized in creating small business software. The initial months were harsh. I was working nonstop, attempting to balance software development, customer meetings, and all of the administrative duties involved in managing a company. After being impressed by my work, a local business owner referred me to his network, which was my first big break. All of a sudden, I had more clients than I could manage alone. My first employee was hired, followed by my second. I had a tiny staff working for me before I realized it. My confidence increased along with the business. I felt like I was actually succeeding on my own terms for the first time in my life. I was no longer living in the shadow of others. I was making something significant, something wholly original. My family was aware of the change, of course. Initially, Emily's texts were just inquisitive inquiries about my well-being. My answers were succinct and ambiguous. Then followed the family get-together invitations, which I graciously turned down because of my professional obligations. The first person to really push was Sarah. One day, she unexpectedly arrived at my workplace. Sarah's eyes widened as she took in the workplace when I walked out to the reception area. Although it wasn't very ostentatious, it was contemporary, polished, and obviously effective. Her voice was a mixture of astonishment and something else I couldn't quite pinpoint when she said, "Michael, this is amazing. Why didn't you inform us of everything?" I shrugged and spoke in a neutral tone. "I have been quite busy." She scowled, obviously dissatisfied with my response. "We have been concerned for you. You no longer attend family dinners. We hardly ever hear back from you." Their parents believe they have done something incorrectly. I experienced a little twinge of guilt. But then I recalled all those years of suffering and feeling inferior as they navigated life with the help of our parents. I said, "I'm doing fine. Actually, it's better than fine." For a while, I simply had to concentrate on my own life. My business kept expanding as the months passed. We expanded our workforce and relocated to a larger office. I even appeared as a rising entrepreneur to watch in a local business publication. My phone was inundated with texts from my family on the day the piece was published. They were all excited, proud, and celebratory. Alongside those emotions, though, I could feel their perplexity and perhaps even a hint of hurt that they were reading about my achievement in a magazine instead of directly from me. None of the mails received a response from me. A part of me felt grim satisfaction, and another part felt guilt. They were the ones on the outside looking in for a change. It was them who were pondering, inquiring, and attempting to comprehend. The next to get in touch was Chris. One evening, as I was leaving the office, he called. When I lifted him up, he said, "Hey, little brother. No talk for a long time. I read that article about your business. It was really amazing." I answered in a neutral tone, "Thanks. A lot of work has gone into this, but it's paying off." "Look," he went on, "we miss you, dude, even though I know the family has been acting strangely recently. This weekend, how about we have supper together? We may congratulate your success and catch up." I was tempted for a second. A part of me missed my family in spite of everything. I thought back to all those dinners, though, where I felt invisible. All the occasions when Chris or Sarah's accomplishments were highlighted above mine. I said, "Thank you for the invitation, But I have a lot of work to do right now, perhaps at a later day. Even though my accomplishment was fulfilling, I realized as I was driving home that evening that it hadn't made things better with my family. It had, if anything, made it wider. I was pleased with my accomplishments and pleased that I had completed everything by myself. However, my success came with a loneliness I hadn't expected. I wasn't prepared to close that gap though. Not quite yet. I had been the family's afterthought for far too long. I wasn't sure whether there was still space for them in my own story, which I was now writing. I would deal with whatever came next on my own terms. Second update, about a year and a half has passed since my last post, and my life has changed drastically once more. The expansion of my tech company has surpassed my wildest expectations. We now serve mid-sized businesses throughout the state as part of our extended service offering. We were listed as one of the top 50 startups to watch in a major business magazine last month. My phone was inundated with congratulations the day the piece was published, but one in particular, a voicemail from my mother, stood out. "Michael, honey, it's Mom. We saw the article. Your father and I are so proud of you. We'd love to talk if you have a moment. Please call us back when you can." I was taken aback. My parents hadn't spoken to me directly in more than a year. I wasn't sure how to react after so much time, so I didn't call back right away. A week later, my assistant told me I had guests when I was working late. I was shocked to see my folks standing in the lobby. They appeared older and more worn out than I had recalled. When they saw me, their eyes glowed with a mixture of pride and apprehension, but Mom's hair had more gray and Dad's shoulders appeared to slump. Mom said hesitantly, "Michael, we hope you don't mind us dropping by like this. We simply had to see you." I escorted them to my office, where they gazed at the contemporary furnishings and the accolades that lined the bookcases. They hadn't seen the struggling child like that in a long time. "This is really amazing, son," Dad remarked in a rough, emotional voice. "You've accomplished a lot for yourself." The uneasy silence was broken by Mom. "We must apologize to you, Michael. After much consideration, we've come to the conclusion that we treated you differently from your siblings. We sincerely apologize for not seeing it at the time, but we do now." A lump formed in my throat. I'd been waiting so long to hear this, but I wasn't sure how to react when the time came. Dad bent over. "We're proud of you, son, not only for your accomplishments but also for taking on this challenge alone. We were oblivious to your abilities until you demonstrated them to us." After that we spoke for a while. I discovered that I was talking more about the setbacks and victories over the previous few years. It was odd, but in a way, it felt perfect, like the puzzle pieces were finally coming together. After a moment of hesitation, Mom continued, "There's something else we wanted to talk to you about, Michael." As our conversation came to an end. "We need your assistance." Immediately, I felt my guard go up. "What sort of assistance?" They looked at one another, and then Dad said something. "The family business is at issue. Son, we're in trouble. We haven't kept up with the changes in the market. Failure to upgrade promptly will put us in danger of becoming bankrupt." Mom hurriedly added, "Especially after everything, we hate to ask. However, we reasoned that given your technological and business acumen." I sat back, feeling a lot of different emotions. Even though their apology appeared genuine and I wanted to get back in touch, I couldn't help but feel suspicious. Was this the true cause of their unexpected arrival? At last, I answered, "I need some time to think about this. There's a lot to take in." With a hopeful yet nervous expression, they nodded. Mom gave me a hard hug as I walked them out. She whispered, "Michael, you are loved. Regardless of what you decide." I spent a lot of time sitting in my office after they went, gazing out at the city lights. I had put forth a lot of effort to prove myself and get here. My family was now requesting my assistance, right after I had achieved the height of my prosperity. I didn't miss the irony. There was a part of me that wanted to be the greater person and offer them assistance. However, a part of me that recalled years of feeling inferior wanted to say no, to let them know that I didn't need them any more than they had needed me. I understood that there was more at stake here than simply business. It had to do with family, forgiveness, and the kind of person I wanted to be. Whatever I chose would influence not just how I interacted with my family but also the type of man I was growing into. With my parents' number displayed on the screen, I took out my phone and gazed at it. Is it better to call or not? Is it better to assist or not? The later the night became and the quieter the city below, the more I thought about the choice. Reddit, what would you do? Do I still owe my family anything after all of this, or is it time to put this chapter behind me for good? Third update. My parents requested assistance with their failing business a month ago. I hired a private investigator since something wasn't quite right. I was shocked by what I found. Instead of failing, the family firm was doing quite well. They had recently landed a big deal. However, it wasn't all. Financial deception spanning years was discovered by the investigator. Inflating the costs of Sarah and Chris's education and marriages, my parents had been transferring funds into personal accounts. $200,000 for Sarah's wedding. A large portion of money was transferred to a covert investing account in her name. Emily's tuition was actually paid into a high-yield savings account, and Chris had a trust fund. In addition to favoring my siblings, they had deliberately worked to secure their financial prosperity at my expense. I was enraged. The deliberate choice to keep me out had been made during all those years of feeling inferior and struggling while my siblings navigated life. I summoned my legal staff to a meeting. There were certain dubious tax strategies that could lead to issues if they were discovered, even if the majority of my parents' acts fell into legal limbo. I invited my folks to come to work with me. They came with a hopeful expression, perhaps expecting me to assist them. When they saw my reaction, their faces sank. I said icily, "Sit down. We must speak." I presented all that I had found. I saw their expressions change from shock to guilt to dread with every admission. "How did you accomplish this?" With a trembling voice, I asked. "You were purposefully keeping me down while uplifting everyone else, even though I felt inadequate all these years. Why?" My mom broke down in tears. According to my father's explanation, they viewed me as the self-sufficient powerful one. He spoke in a hollow voice. I interrupted him, saying, "I don't want excuses. I want you to be aware of what is about to happen." I informed them that I had contacted the IRS anonymously about their dubious tax procedures. Additionally, I had provided Sarah, Chris, and Emily with proof of how they had profited from our parents' dishonesty. I remarked, "Your ideal family image is about to fall apart. And you can't buy your way out of it this time. Please, Michael," my father pleaded. "We can make this right. We'll put things right." I chuckled without humor. "That's the issue, Dad. You continue to believe that money can solve any problem. However, you cannot purchase my forgiveness. The years I spent feeling unworthy are irreplaceable." I got to my feet. "Go now. Never again do I want to hear from any of you. I no longer consider myself to have a family." My mother glanced back, crying, as they walked away. "You are loved, Michael, we always have." I gave her a direct look. "I don't want to be involved if this is how you define love." I stayed in my office for a while after they left, feeling a mixture of relief, betrayal, and rage. I was relieved that I could finally stop questioning my value and that I knew the truth. Sarah, Chris, and Emily sent me texts in the days that followed. Some were irate, some beseeching. None of them received a response from me. With fresh energy, I pushed myself back into my work. My business kept expanding, and I discovered fulfillment in coaching aspiring business owners from comparable backgrounds. 6 months have passed since that altercation. The pain of what I've lost, or rather, what I never truly had, still aches on some days. Mostly, though, I feel liberated. Free from the burden of attempting to convince others of my value when they never intended to. I am aware that some people may believe that I was too severe and that the family deserves forgiveness. However, I've discovered that leaving poisonous relationships, even ones that include your own blood, can occasionally be the healthiest course of action. To everyone who has ever felt like the odd one out, know that your value is not based on how your family views you. You possess the ability to craft your own narrative, generate your own achievements, and locate those who will appreciate you for who you are. For my part, I'm concentrating on creating my chosen family, which consists of friends and coworkers that encourage me, share in my accomplishments without feeling envious, and support me during difficult times without keeping score. Regardless of our backgrounds or experiences, let's celebrate fresh starts, chosen families, and creating our own narratives. We have the power to influence the future, and I'm eager to see where that takes us.